Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, my name is Kaylee, and on this channel we cover all things true crime, travel, lifestyle, and just generalized vlogs. If you are new here and you have yet to hit that subscribe button, please consider hitting it, as it really does help our channel grow. Now, you have stumbled into our true crime section of our channel, and I have to give a warning. True crime is most certainly not for everybody. There are details in cases that you may find disturbing or offensive, and if you think this may be you, please click off and go to one of our other videos. I'm sure there'll be something here in the channel that you will enjoy. Today's case is about Rachael Betts, a Victorian woman who was brutally murdered in 2009. So let's jump straight into her case. Rachael was born on the 5th of January 1982. She was the eldest of three girls who were raised by their mum, Sandra. Now, Rachael was 11 years older than her two younger siblings, and she would often look after the girls and help to babysit them as they were growing up. She had a very big passion for looking after children. She enjoyed it immensely. And we believe that it was because of her babysitting and helping out with her two younger sisters that she really developed this passion and wanted to take that as her future career. As Rachael got older, it was unfortunately discovered that she was going to have a difficulty having her own children as well. So it really did drive her passion to help others look after their children. And Rachael was known to being a social butterfly. She loved to have people around her. She loved to social interact. She was really a caretaker of people. She loved to help people throughout their lives. In November of 2008, Rachael met two young teenage girls. Now, I'm going to leave their identities out of this. It was actually very difficult to even find their identities throughout any research, so we're just going to keep it that way. We're going to keep their identities out of it. But these two young girls, they were having difficulties at home, and therefore when they went to Rachael's house, she said to them, you're more than welcome to come and stay here. And eventually Rachael would become a foster parent, so to say, to the two young girls. Of course, looking after two young teenagers would be a very stressful thing, and Rachael does start to seem like she's getting very worn down. She's very tired, and life is really starting to take a toll on Rachael. She does have a current circle of friends, and unfortunately throughout this time she starts to lose contact with them. Little fights and things would start to happen in amongst this circle of friends, and eventually they would drift away. At this time also, a new circle of friends come into Rachael's life, or they re-come into Rachael's life. These people were all people that Rachael would have known throughout school and had previously chose not to associate with. But now she's starting to hang in that rough circle of people. It's also during this time that Rachael loses one of her two jobs, and money then also starts to become an issue. Because of the financial difficulties Rachael is now facing, she is recruited and starts selling drugs. Unfortunately, though, Rachael doesn't just sell the drugs, she starts to use them herself as well, and she becomes addicted to meth. This, of course, just plays havoc with her body and her mind. Because of Rachael's drug abuse, she starts to become very paranoid. She thinks that people are out to get her and harm her, and she even has a car accident one day, and she blames the other person as being someone that wanted to physically harm her, and says that it was all a big conspiracy and not actually an accident. During this time, Rachael's best friend Deanne, who she was currently living with, she decides she needs to move out and get away from this situation. In late July of 2009, Rachael does go into rehab and manages to get herself clean and sober. Once she is released from rehab, she moves back into the family home with her mum, Sandra, and her two siblings, and she starts to live her normal life. One weekend, Rachael decides to have a party though, and at this party, the two young girls who are being fostered arrive, and a bunch of other people. And during this party, Sandra realizes that somebody has in fact brought drugs. So she instantly says the party is over, everybody needs to leave, and shuts it down. Unfortunately, Rachael decides that she is going to leave the house and the party as well and go off with the two girls that she was fostering. Now, sadly, this was the last time that Rachael's younger sisters would ever see her alive. Now, just a couple of days later, Sandra calls Rachael and she is quoted as saying that she begged Rachael to come home. She said that she knew that the people that Rachael were currently staying with and were hanging around with were not safe, and she was going to end up just in a downward spiral again. She begged Rachael to come home and basically return to living in the family home with herself, but Rachael, she just would not have a bar of it and wouldn't come home. The last person noted to actually speak with Rachael was Deanne, who had called her on the phone. Now, they had currently made up and were back to being friendly, even though they were no longer living together. And during this conversation, Deanne says that she was talking to Rachael and Rachael was leaving her current house in Epping, where she currently lived, and was going to Heidelberg to meet her new boss, and they were going on a fishing trip. Now, Rachael had told Deanne that she was only going to be gone for 48 hours and that she would be back on Monday, when the pair had planned to catch up and have a day together. It seemed from that point that Rachael had just completely vanished. She was not in contact with anybody and nobody had actually heard from her. And then on the 18th of August, a leg is washed up on the Newhaven beach in Phillip Island with a very distinctive tattoo. Now, this tattoo was two flowers with a thorn sort of wrapped through them. And it was something that, Sandra, she knew that it was very recognizable, and she started to panic that it could in fact be Rachael's tattoo. She started to contact all of Rachael's friends, asking if anyone had actually seen Rachael or heard from Rachael in the previous couple of days or week. And she even rang the two girls that Rachael was fostering. Now, one of the girls told Sandra that she had not seen or heard from Rachael in a couple of days. And the other girl had said that she had spoken to Rachael that afternoon. Sandra knew that this was just not right, that somebody was lying in this situation. Rachael would never leave those girls unattended, or at least would not give them a time frame for when she would be gone and returning. She still very much cared for these girls and would, make sure that they always had a way of contacting her, or at least would know when she would be returning home. It is at this time that Sandra contacts the police and DNA testing is conducted. It is sadly then realised that the leg and foot that they have found on the beach is that of Rachael's, and the police determine that this injury sustained in the removal of this leg most certainly would have resulted in death. So at that point in time, it is ruled that Rachael has most certainly been killed. 3 weeks later, more of Rachael's body does wash up on the shore. Unfortunately, though, her entire remains were not actually recovered. And now, with the police investigation well underway, a name keeps reoccurring to the police, and that is of John Leslie Coombs. John Coombs was born on the 14th of September 1954, and at the time of Rachael's death, he was almost 55 years old. Now, he had left school at the age of 15 and had gone out and got himself an apprenticeship as a mechanic. He never actually finished the apprenticeship, and by the age of 18 had enrolled into the army. In 1974, though, he was discharged from the army after sustaining a head injury. John was also married at the age of 19 and had 2 children of his own, but he got divorced in 1985. Now, John, he was a very, very shady character, and his criminal history was not good. John was, in fact, the person who had recruited Rachael into selling drugs and was now Rachael's boss. Later on in the investigation, diaries of Rachael's are discovered where she has written that she is actually really afraid of her current boss, who she was referring to as JC. The police now assume that JC stood for John Coombs. Now, as I said, John had a very horrible criminal history and a very, very horrible past. In 1984, he was convicted of murder. In 1984, John stabbed to death Henry Kuehls in his Chelsea home. In December of 1985, he was arrested and charged with this murder and sentenced to prison. After appealing his sentence, he was granted a lighter sentencing with a minimum sentencing of 11 years. Then just 7 weeks after his release in 1996, John was arrested again for murder. 2 months before he had actually murdered Henry, John had also murdered Michael Pirani by stabbing and mutilating his body. He then took Michael on a supposed fishing trip and dumped his body just a few kilometers off the coast of Port Phillip Bay. So again, John is convicted and in 1998 is sentenced to a further 10 years. He was then again released on parole in 2007. With John being the main person of interest now, the police go and gather enough evidence to go and arrest John. At the same time, they decide to arrest 3 other individuals in an effort to stop them all from talking amongst themselves. So the police coordinate this, so they're all arrested on the same day. One of the people was Maureen Renwick, was John's current partner at the time. Another one arrested was Nicole Godfrey and Ryan Brushima. During the police interviews, John does confess to murdering Rachael, but his stories change and vary from interview to interview. But this is what the police believe has actually happened. On the night of Rachael's murder, Rachael and John travelled together to Phillip Island, where they went to Maureen's house. Now, it was there that Rachael apparently has told John that she was sexually abusing the 2 foster girls, according to John. Now, she said that there were pictures of them on the internet and that, you know, if John wanted to have his way with one of the girls, she was able to make that happen. Apparently, John at this point seen red and was unable to control his urges and strangled Rachael to death. It's at that point that John claims he was just out of his mind with anger and decided that Rachael did not deserve to leave the world as a woman. He then mutilated her breasts and decided to dissect her. He took her body and placed it into the bathtub, where he began dissecting the body and splitting her into pieces. At one point, he even goes out of the room and asks Maureen, would she like to come in and watch this happen? John then claims that he wrapped the pieces from Rachael's body into garbage bags and decided to go and dump them into the ocean. And it was at this point in time that the bathtub was also cleaned with bleach. But this was where police started to really have doubts about some of John's story. So when they discovered this, they went and investigated the bathtub, and forensic analysis just did not find any DNA evidence of Rachael being in the bath or even in the vicinity of the rooms that John claims Rachael was in. There was no DNA evidence of Rachael in this house at all. So police were a bit, they just, there's no way they could have cleaned the house that thoroughly. So the police are already doubting if this is in fact where Rachael was killed. During John's trial, his defense team do bring up the accusations against Rachael and how she has supposedly sexually assaulted and abused the 2 foster girls. But the 2 foster girls, they take the stand and say that it is absolute rubbish. It just never happened. The police have also come forward and said there's never been any evidence of this, and it was really just a way for the defense team to slam against Rachael's name. Eventually, John pleads guilty to the murder of Rachael, and he is sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Now remember, he had done this horrific thing to Rachael while he was on parole, so he now must return to prison and serve out his sentence for killing Michael Pirani, and then he will start his life sentence without parole. Basically, John Coombs will die in prison where he really belongs. Now, if you have watched a few of our videos, you will see a common theme in our true crime area, and that is that a lot of these monsters that are going out and committing these crimes are out on bail or have previously been in prison and are so-called reformed. This is not a theme that I have intentionally set into play. I have just gone out and researched cases that sort of piqued my interest, or I have, jumped a little bit, and then as I've researched, I've discovered that the people that have committed these crimes are out on bail and things like that. That terrifies me. It means that there's so many of these cases where And people are given second chances, and in this case, third chances, and it's like, wow, what is happening? Come on. Who lets somebody who has committed 2 murders out on parole? Who does that? Apparently our justice system. I can't even get started on it. It's insane. It's just absolutely insane. And again, I realize that this is a case from a while ago now. So I would hope that whoever's sitting on these parole boards and whoever has set out the curriculum that is followed to allow prisoners to be paroled has really had a good hard look at this, because come on, this is ridiculous. But yeah, I did not go out and set this theme for our videos. It has just naturally occurred. Again, that scares me. I would like to send my deepest sympathies and condolences to Rachel's friends and family, who no doubt live with the impact of what has happened to her every single day of their lives. And yeah, just my deepest sympathies to you guys. Again, if you have not hit that subscribe button, please consider hitting it. It really will help our channel grow. And I just hope you all take care of yourselves and each other. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye guys.